Okay. Usually if there are technical problems on TV, you get some entertainment, but don't know what to do. Yeah. Okay, so we're online. Welcome to this first international week of the summer season. It's the fifth Scandinavian week, but the first international week. And if you want to listen to the lecture in Swedish, you tune into the interpretation on channel 2. In Danish, it will be on channel 3, and in German, channel 4. So we're really international. So my theme for today is, how do we create our fate? And implicit in the title is the idea that we create our own fate. And of course, many people live with the idea that fate is a matter of chance. It's, life is meaningless, there's no meaning to anything, and it's totally unjust. I had a friend recently who had cancer, and she said, it's just a matter of chance. I was unlucky, you know. And a lot of people really live with that idea. And some people are happy to live with it, and other people get very depressed and lose the sort of courage to live life to the full. But when you look at life, you can say that there's a lot of apparent injustice. Some people are born with congenital diseases and they're sick their whole lives. Others get sick early on and they're invalids their whole lives. Others, and we see the news at the moment, Ukrainian women are giving birth in cellars and in horrible conditions. Imagine being a baby brought into the world while the bombs are falling around you. The list could go on and on. Many people are born to very loving parents who really take care of them, and other people are born to parents who are alcoholics or drug addicts or some other way are incapable of looking after their children and misuse them in the most terrible ways. So life looks very unjust. But according to Martinus, there is no injustice in the world at all. And I want to show some of the laws of life that govern this and show that there is justice in life all the same. The church's answer to all of this is that the dark fate that we experience, and of course it's a dark fate that bothers us. We don't usually complain when things are going well. The dark fate that we experience is a punishment from God for the sins we have committed. They even invented the original sin so that you were born a sinner, so you could be punished from day one. So, but Martinus says that sins don't exist. The idea of sin is just an expression for ignorance. We don't know what we're doing. And we remember that Christ said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. We really don't know what we're doing in very large areas of our life. So, Martinus didn't agree with the church when it said that our dark fate was a punishment from God. So, I want to start by showing you some quotations. And I have more quotations in this lecture than I usually do, so I hope you can bear with me. So Martinus starts Livets Bog, the Book of Life, by saying every living being, and then there's a long bit about all the different kinds of living beings, every living being is subject to the experience of life. And I would claim that the experience of life is the theme for Martinus' entire works. Show me a sentence in his works that don't deal with the experience of life. I think, if you can find one, let me know. But I think everything he writes has to do with the experience of life. But what is this experience of life? Here's a long quote. This is the second section in Livets book. As the experience of life can exist only as an interaction between two forms of energy, namely the energy radiating from the universe in the form of our surroundings, and the energy radiating from our own inner being in the form of our manifestation. And as this interaction in the form of the experience of life is really identical with the creation of our own existence, it must be clearly evident that we each constitute a by no means insignificant factor in this creation of our fate. And this especially so owing to the fact that in a certain area we do possess a so-called free will. It's a long sentence. The idea is that we receive energies from our surroundings and we ourselves send out energies, and we have a certain degree of free will, so we can choose to a certain extent what we send out. He then goes on in this fourth section to talk about knowledge as a regulating factor in what we send out. He says, our knowledge will in reality constitute the dominating factor in the regulation of our interaction with the influences directed towards us by nature. As we come to understand how to avoid those forms of energy that are unpleasant and displeasing, we shall come more and more under the influence of those forms of energy that are pleasing and pleasant. So we can begin to use our will to direct the course of our life, what we experience. We can, our knowledge increases as we evolve, and we can use this knowledge to change our behavior. And Martinus shows this interaction of these two forms of energy in this symbol. This is his main symbol, and I won't explain it all, but we can see here this white plate underneath the whole figure, and that is the I, the letter I as in I am, not this kind of I, the I of God, and this purple area is the superconsciousness of God, all the spiritual abilities and so on. And then we have the organism of God. And then we see that there are all these little white circles, and they are the individual eyes. So we have minerals, plants, animals, and we belong to the second half of the animal kingdom, and we're evolving towards the real human kingdom, which we will reach at this point, which Martinus says is about 3,000 years ahead for most of us. And then we have some very high spiritual kingdoms. But we see from this, the middle of this star, we see some rays emanating out, and we see from the small figures some other rays. So these ones are the individual living beings. It could be me, it could be you, it could be a dog, it could be a cat or whatever, sending out energies towards the universe and receiving impulses from the universe. And where these flames are, this whole colored area, is the area in which we experience life. So he's showing that this experience of life is an interaction of two energies. So here he says that what we send out determines actually what we receive. So these two things are totally interdependent. So it matters what we send out. It really matters. And actually, he called his work many things, but among other things, a science of behavior. He wants to help us learn to live in such a way that we can be happy and healthy and have good relationships and have peace on earth. So this is where we are at the moment. And we are, of course, in the second half of the animal kingdom. The killing principle was absolutely vital for the animals, and it's become a terrible habit for us, but terrible in the sense that it's very strong. But now we are so tired of all these killing energies, and we're longing for peace and harmony, and we're in this process of developing more humaneness, developing towards being Christ beings, each and every one of us. So Martinus's purpose was to create this science of behavior. It was also his purpose to remove our ignorance. He wanted to make us become familiar with the laws of life. This is a game where we haven't known the rules really. How do we play this game in order to win, so to speak? So this is what he wants to help us with. So how is our fate formed? What is the formation of fate? In the cosmic sense, it constitutes the coming into existence of a living being's experience of the effects of the causes it has itself released. Does a living being then release his own fate? Yes, absolutely. As no form whatsoever of the experience of life can exist without being identical with an interaction between the emission of energy of the being concerned and the emission of its surroundings, every form of experience will thus be the same as a reception and a transmission of energy. And he goes on, as no energy whatsoever can proceed in a straight line but must move in a circle, every transmission of energy will invariably, sooner or later, come back to its source. So now I want to show you some symbols rather quickly that show how this circulation of energy works. This is the law of movement, and we see what appears to be a straight line at the top of the figure here. But it's not a straight line. It's part of a circle that's 40 meters in diameter. But it looks like a straight line. And then the other arcs are more clearly parts of circles. And here we have a full circle. And here we have a square. Since there's no such thing as a straight line, there is no such thing as an absolute square either. So all energies, all movements move in circles or cycles. They return to their source. And here we have a symbol of the living being here. And we see that all the energies we send out return to ourselves. And they can return very quickly, or they can take a long, long time. If I touch a hot plate, the karma wave comes back very quickly. If I do something else, maybe it won't come back till tomorrow, or next year, or in 4 lifetimes, or in 50 lifetimes, or in the next spiral cycle. So we're talking about a principle of karma waves that are always building up and continually circulating around us. And the different sizes have 2 meanings. One is that they can be very quick acting, but they could also be not so significant, something mild. Or they can be big and slow acting, but they could also be very, very serious. So, and he uses the color violet here, so he's showing the principle of karma. You send out energies and they come back to you. At the moment, he hasn't defined them as pleasant or unpleasant. And he continues in this symbol to show the same, but now it's spread out over the principle of reincarnation. And of course, no life could be just at all if we only had one life. I mean, if you were born into this life, let's say you were born when the atom bomb was falling on Hiroshima, and you were severely damaged by the radiation, and that was the only life you got. I mean, there's no justice in that. So the law of karma, the law of justice, can only be true if we take reincarnation into consideration. And this is what he shows here. So we see here our present life, symbolized by this purple area, this orange rectangle. And we see previous lives, these orange rectangles getting darker and darker into the past. And other ones here, these are future incarnations where they get lighter and lighter. And this shows that the purpose of karma, which I'll come back to, is to help us evolve towards a higher state. So the yellow color is our past, the green is our future, and the purple is the now, the eternal now. So we see that in this life, we are sending out various karma waves of various sizes. We have some very small ones that come back immediately, or in this life at least. And then we have some that come back in the next life, or come back in 2 lives, or in 4 lives, or go on and come back much later. The same here, that we're receiving karma from this life, from the previous life, from 2 lives ago, from 3 lives ago, and so on. And in Livsbog 4, if I remember rightly, Martinus says something about the fate of the Jews, that it was accumulated karma for 40, 50 lives ago. It's like a whole accumulation that could result in such intense suffering. So karma can build up and be released in situations where it's most appropriate. So what it means is that in this now, we are in this very moment, we're in contact with our past, because our past is what's coming back to us as our fate, be it pleasant or unpleasant. And we're constantly creating our future by what we're sending out. So this is a wonderful control room, really, karma control room. We can decide what's going to come back at us by what we send out. And of course that is the art of living, and I certainly haven't learned it yet, but we will all get there. This is not a symbol one should have on a train. It's on the back cover of the books, and if you sit in the train reading and someone else, you get the most awful looks. People look terrified. Anyway, it's called Through the Darkness of Initiation, Hell or Armageddon. And we see here the same idea of life after life after life after life. And these little boxes in between are our holiday in the spiritual world between incarnations. Now these karma waves have been colored orange. And orange is the color for the killing principle, the energy of gravity, which is everything to do with aggression, violence, and so on. So this is really the situation where this living being here receives some unpleasant form of karma and responds in the same way. So it's the principle of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. So the key thing about this is that this person believes that the person coming with this unpleasant karma is to blame. It's your fault. It's your fault. It's not my fault. It's the fault of society. It's the fault of my parents or whatever. So this is there's no understanding. There's no forgiveness here, and you just answer in the same coin, so to speak. And we see the result of this. The result of viewing other people as your enemies is this world conflagration we see around here. We see this world on fire, really. We see natural catastrophes. We see a belief in materialism, the belief in the one life theory. So it's a very dark world, but I mean, is it darker than what we see on the news at the moment? It could be the news that, whatever is going on. So it's a dark picture, but Martinus calls it a form of initiation, because the idea of evolution is that we become totally loving and totally wise, all-knowing, but you can't know everything unless you know darkness. You have to know darkness as much as you know light. So through this process of experience a lot of dark karma, then we become all-knowing. We know every corner of what darkness looks like. So it's an initiation, and the light is shining behind it, because it's not only unpleasant, it's the unpleasant good. Martinus talks about 2 kinds of experience of life: the pleasant good and the unpleasant good. And both are good from an eternal perspective, because all experience of life, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, furthers our evolution. But war and illness and unhappy marriages and unemployment and whatever, none of those things are pleasant. No one can say they're pleasant. So I think when Martinus calls the experience of life the pleasant good and the unpleasant good, they're basically the two forms of experience of life, then he has empathy, because he's saying, well, things are pleasant and things are unpleasant. And that's our temporal perspective. That's his here and now perspective. It hurts, or it doesn't hurt, or it's lovely, whatever. But the eternal perspective is, it's very, very good. It couldn't be better. Because it's what we need to keep our consciousness alive, to renew our consciousness. In order to renew our consciousness and have an eternal consciousness, we need to experience dark contrasts and light contrasts. Just like this symbol needs to create a contrast to the background, otherwise you wouldn't see it. So, quickly onwards. This shows the same idea. We see a dark karma wave being sent out in this life, and coming back in the same life. So if you kill someone, maybe you'll be killed immediately yourself. If you make a critical, rude remark to someone, maybe someone will criticize you, or whatever. So it could be on any level, from the tiniest bit of criticism to assassinations and murder and so on. Anything of a negative nature. And here we see it can come back in the next life, or the second life, or the third, and so on. And we see that something happened. Oh, sorry. We see that something happened here. That there's a flame here that's growing all the way through the symbol. And this is humane compassion. This is empathy. This is neighborly love. It's understanding other living beings. So let's say in this case, you had the heart to kill somebody, and you got killed yourself. Of course, nobody actually dies in the absolute sense, because you lose your organism, but you go over to the spiritual worlds, and you do reincarnate. So there's no absolute death, but still, it's not a good idea to lose your organism before it's ready to die. Anyway, if this karma wave waits to come back, then your empathy will have developed through your own unpleasant experiences. And it can grow and grow and grow until it gets to a stage that your empathy is so total, so complete, that you couldn't possibly even dream of doing what you did in the past. And at this point, you really understand how it feels to be murdered, or how it feels to be criticized, or whatever it is. So this is an interpretation of this ecclesiastical term, the forgiveness of, or biblical term, the forgiveness of sins. There's no sin in the absolute sense. Sin is ignorance. But here you have gained knowledge, and this knowledge has increased your empathy. And it increases and increases life after life. We see eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. And then a bit more yellow starts coming into these returning karma waves. And this is humane feeling. This is compassion. So here we understand that here's a living being. He's receiving some dark karma. But here he understands that it's only something I myself have sent out in some way, at some point in my past. Life is lifting up a mirror and saying, this is how you can be. And instead of blaming the postman for bringing the bill, you say, well, it was me that used the phone far too much, and I have to pay the bill. But somebody else has to deliver the bill, of course, but it's my bill. So then you can meet this so-called enemy with understanding and forgiveness, and send out a warm and loving karma wave. And this takes you gradually out of the animal kingdom. The better we get at it, it takes a lot of practice over many lives, but gradually we emerge from the animal kingdom to become the finished human being in God's image after his likeness. Christ was an example of one of those. So we will get the same kind of consciousness as Christ. We'll become cosmically conscious, and there will be total peace on earth when we all get there. So don't shoot the postman. So Martinus talked about 3 kinds of fate: mesocosmic, microcosmic, and macrocosmic. So let's look at those. Maybe I should define the mesocosmos. Well, I'll define the 3 terms. We've heard about the macrocosmos and the microcosmos. Here am I on Earth, and I am a microcosmic being of the Earth. So the Earth is a living being. It is a microcosmic being in the Milky Way, which is a microcosmic being in a bigger galaxy, and so on. At the same time, the Earth is a macrocosmic being in relation to me. The Milky Way is macrocosmic in relation to the Earth, and so on, solar system. The mesocosmos is the beings that are on the same level as us. So we are all mesocosmic in relation to one another. So the mesocosmic beings are other human beings, animals, and plants. So the mesocosmic fate arises from our relationship to people, animals, and plants. And one could say that we have a lot of karma that's due to us from our treatment of the animals. We kill animals by the million daily in order to eat them. Not because we feel vicious, but because we don't understand that we can live without eating meat, and not only live, but live much better. There's our relationship to people. We have a lot of conflicts with all sorts of people we work with people in our families and friends and so on. I won't go into the plants right now. Mesocosmic fate is also all forms of war, unrest, killing, and torture. So that's our relationship to our fellow beings. He talks about mesocosmic fate also being an unnatural death from meat eating. I've written lack of protection. He talks about 2 kinds of karma in relation to meat eating. One of them is this lack of protection. To the extent that we protect others, we are protected ourselves. That is a really golden rule of life. If you protect others, you will be protected yourselves. In our relationship to the animals, we can see that we don't protect the animals. So then we are open to, we're predisposed to an unnatural, premature death. Because that's what we inflict on the animals. We can also see, we have seen with the pandemic that we have put, we've known for a long time, we put animals in concentration camps. Look at the mink and the cows and the pigs and so on. They live in the most terrible, terrible circumstances. And what happens? Yeah, we get locked in for a couple of years. So there's a lot of karma to be received from our treatment of the animals, and one of them is this lack of protection. Okay, so and then another form of mesocosmic fate is the suffering that we feel because of the transformation of the sexual poles. There will be simple explanations about this later in the week, so I won't go in details, but this is things like unrequited love. You fall in love with someone who doesn't fall in love with you. It's divorces, persecution because you have a sexuality that other people don't understand. It can be loneliness, infertility, and many other things. So those are some examples of mesocosmic fate. And then there's microcosmic fate, and this is illness, all forms of illness. And he talks about illnesses can arise from overstraining oneself with more work than one's organism can take. And of course that can be physical things. You can lift things that are far too heavy or have a job that's really heavy. But it can also be mental, that you work too hard, you work late into the night, and or you've got a deadline, so it doesn't matter, I don't need to sleep tonight, I can work till 2 and 3 in the morning and grab a couple of hours before I go to work. So that kind of thing takes its toll on the organism. And then he talks about the consumption of substances that are neither food nor normal forms of drink. And he mentions tobacco, drugs, and alcohol. And of course, Martinus doesn't criticize anybody for taking drugs or smoking or drinking alcohol or eating meat. But he feels very obliged to analyze what happens if we do these things. And of course, we damage our lungs if we smoke. We damage the whole organism, really. We can take drugs and we suffer both in this life, but we can also create the preconditions for an abnormal existence in the next life, he said. The same to a certain extent with alcohol. Then he talks also about a lot of illnesses being due to misguided nutrition. Again, he mentions meat eating, that the other consequence of meat eating is that we get ill. It's we have this superstition that we have to eat meat in order to survive. But Martinus explains in the little book, The Ideal Food, that the eating meat will actually undermine our organisms and lead to ill health. And this has been backed up very, very thoroughly by modern science. He talks about lack of sleep, exercise, and hygiene. And he talks about animal thoughts, which are forces of nature in our microcosmos. Animal thoughts, those are thoughts that are very appropriate when you are a real animal, a beast of prey. But there's things like anger and hatred and impatience and bitterness and intolerance. And when you think these things, then microscopic particles from your organs, the cells within your organs, the parts of the cells and so on, they are thrown out of their natural surroundings and into other organ galaxies, as he calls them. And they can cause a lot of illnesses and so on. So, for example, if you're really stressed and anxious, maybe you've got a job that's too difficult for you, too much responsibility, then particles from your lung galaxy can go into the stomach galaxy. And if you're very angry and bitter and so on, the particles can go the other way and go into your lung galaxy and so on. Other particles can fly into the brain and develop tumors and so on. So that's another lecture, really. But if you want to read about it, I would recommend an article called Particles. What's it called? Particles, something, and empty. Particles, empty space, and the power of thought. That's what it is. Particles, empty space, and the power of thought. Partikler, tomrum og tankekraft. Yeah. And then there's macrocosmic fate. And that's things like the influences of nature, floods, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes, pollution, and things like atomic waste. And the macrocosmic fate, what we experience from the Earth in the form of these catastrophes, reflects what we do to our microcosmos. So if we fill our microcosmos with these so-called animal thoughts and create hurricanes and storms and volcanic eruptions in our organism, then we can experience the same from our microcosmos. So suddenly the Earth is the place we live in is flooded, or there's a volcanic eruption, or so on, and so on. So what we experience from the outside reflects what we are doing to our insides. In his latter years, he talked a lot about atomic waste. He was actually quite funny about it, really, but very, very adamant. He kept saying, atomic waste, it will give the Earth constipation, forstoppelse, because atomic waste it can't go into the cycle. It sort of sticks there. The half-life of atomic waste is so long. So, yeah, and we see that there are a lot of there are a lot of initiatives today to clean up the oceans, get rid of the plastic, to clean up the air, and the climate. The people who are working with climate are doing a lot of good work. So I've talked a bit about individual fate, but there is the collective fate of mankind. And Martinus stresses that even though a fate seems to be collective, it's always individual. But karma waves are sort of arranged in such a way, there's something called providence, but that arranges that the karma waves are sort of gathered together and sent into an area. And like if all of us had to experience the same kind of karma at the same moment, we would be gathered together where this karma wave could hit us. But I mean, we've all heard of stories where somebody missed a plane that turned out to crash, or I had a friend who missed her train for work, and she'd never done that in years of working in the same place, but she missed her train that day because she had a stomachache and she just couldn't straighten up. And the train crashed. So it's like she was pulled out and the train could crash. So all of these things are organized. So collective karma is always individual. Here we see the situation where the earth is on fire. And that symbolizes all the unrest that's in the world at the moment. All the strikes and lockouts and wars and different pandemics, all the problems that are going on. And this is a consequence of two individuals or two groups or two nations being in conflict with one another. And they're blocking off this light, this love from the universe. It's their own attitude to one another that is preventing them experiencing the love that is penetrating the whole universe. And Martinus talks about the army corps of the world conflagration. Maybe that's a difficult word for Scandinavians. It's Verdensbrand. He says, every human being who succumbs to the tiniest trace of superstition, intolerance, thirst for power, greed, or dishonesty is an enlisted soldier in the army corps of the aforesaid world conflagration, is a party to hunting, wounding, and killing, is a party to plundering, torturing, and degrading, no matter how many beautiful, noble ideals he or she might otherwise harbor. So it's strong stuff. It's very strong stuff. The tiniest trace. Yeah. And he goes on and he says, of course, the good aspects of the individual's consciousness should not be belittled or underrated. These contribute to creating the counterbalance to the world conflagration, to which I will later return. He goes on to say, but no one can be totally acquitted of being a directly contributing cause of the evil or disharmony in the social system, as long as he or she has the tiniest trace of these thought climates that promote the world conflagration. So we have some work to do. So in other contexts, he says that the quickest way to peace is to become a peace cell yourself, to make yourself one cell of peace. We're all cells in the brain of the earth. And for every peaceful thought, every peaceful action, we're increasing our talent for creating peace in our surroundings. So here we see the current situation, the unfinished human kingdom. We see again this is the earth, and these different patches are the nations, different nations, and the circles with the arrows are other governments. And we see that 2/3 of the Earth's population is more or less pointing in the direction of the killing principle. They think this is how life should be lived. One should take revenge, one should go to war, and so on. And 1/3 has come under the influence of the humane religions or spiritual science, humane impulses, and is more or less turning away from the killing principle. I say more or less because we're not there yet completely. This is the current situation. And we see here the result of this. This is the karma of mankind. And again, we see this 2/3 that are worshipping the principle of killing. And we see this flame coming in, and this symbolizes people who are killed, maybe on the first day of a war, and they're killed and removed from the situation, so to speak. So it sounds drastic, but in that way they're prevented from experiencing years of war. Here, this karma wave is much more severe, and this is those who are injured in wars, severely injured, and have to live the rest of their lives as invalids. And I've often used the example of being in England when the soldiers came back from the Falklands War, and they were 19, 20, 21 years old. And some of them had been, I remember seeing, I lived in Devon at that time, and I remember seeing these convoys of military vehicles going back to Plymouth, where there was a big naval base. But there were so many young men who'd had their faces burned off, their hands burned off, their sexual organs burned off, their feet burned off. They were just, but they were alive. They survived it. And this is really a very hard karma, very, very hard. That's a whole life in that state. So it's better to get away in the beginning, so to speak. But of course, it's even better is to create such good karma that you're not receptive to that kind of karma. If you can't send out those energies, you won't receive them. And this is all leading somewhere. And here again, we see these different nations of the earth, but now they're green and yellow. They're colored, they've got different figures on them, just to show that they have different cultural backgrounds, they have their individual characteristics, but they are all this complete marriage between intelligence, the green, and yellow, which is humane feeling, and they're all God-centered, so to speak. We have this cosmically conscious world government in the center. Here there is total harmony on earth, and this is where all of this is leading. And we see in the background cosmic science, this white bit, dominating this whole picture. The humane world religions, the yellow bit, came before, and the orange were the more primitive religions. So, how do we deal with our fate? Martinus talked about Christ as a model of how to deal with our fate. He says here, to Christ it was self-evident that the kingdom of heaven could not be a kind of external kingdom before it was completed internally in every single terrestrial human being. The kingdom of heaven can become an external kingdom only once every single citizen of that kingdom bears neighborly love and unselfishness in his or her heart. So this is the work we have before us, to create this kingdom of heaven within us. Then it will exist outside. He goes on. That's the reason why Jesus saw that the kingdom of heaven could not become a true reality in the outer world through the formation of religions or church communities, through baptism or sacraments alone, but must be crowned and confirmed by his coming in the clouds with great power and glory, which means with the birth of his mentality in every single individual human being's exercising of will and concentration of thought. So he talks about the second coming of Christ being not, here we see Christ who's risen from the dead after the crucifixion, and the apostles around being flabbergasted. the second coming of Christ is a symbol of what's happening to us now. There is a Christ child within us that is beginning to grow. And that is all the loving thoughts, the caring thoughts, our loving actions and so on. It's this internal kingdom of heaven that we're building up. And when that is built up sufficiently, we will have cosmic consciousness like Christ himself. So we are being resurrected from a kind of cosmic death. He talks about cosmic unconsciousness being a kind of cosmic death, that we don't understand the laws of life. But we are gradually, through reaping painful experiences as well as pleasant experiences, we're gradually learning the laws of life. And this Christ being will emerge in ourselves. We will become Christ beings ourselves. So he asks the question, how can we prepare the second coming of Christ within ourselves? And he says in an article in Cosmos, where ignorance is removed, so-called evil ceases to exist. And this was part of Martinus' task, that was to remove evil. No, to remove ignorance. And in doing so, help us remove evil. And remove evil from our own consciousnesses, not the other people's consciousness, but our own. And that kind of thing tends to get infectious, so one can inspire the others. He goes on to say, first and foremost, by bringing the experience of the knowledge of the laws of life, on which all experience of fate depends, within the range of the functioning of our brain, so that we, with our intelligence or our awake, clear reason and logical judgment, can arrive at the point where we understand the cause of our neighbor's mentality and way of being, and thereby can learn to see the foolishness in every form of hatred, revenge, or persecution of this neighbor. Yeah, so we have to learn to look at our neighbor with new eyes and get rid of hatred, revenge, and persecution. Every unhappy fate has its roots and cause in ignorance. Wherever we are ignorant, we are thinking wrongly. And if we are thinking wrongly, we are also exercising our will wrongly. So some people say ignorance is bliss, but I think the opposite is the case. So we have to become familiar with the cosmic laws and principles. He says here, to many of these human beings, it can therefore be of great importance to learn that the cause of this state of affairs is to be found exclusively in themselves. Without knowledge of the deeper laws of fate, by far the majority of human beings will look for the cause of their unhappy fate outside themselves or in phenomena that they have no influence over. And of course, this is a wonderful situation that if we are the cause of our own fate, we are in total control. I can decide within the limits of my own talents and abilities, I can decide how to act. I can decide if I move to the right or move to the left. I can decide if I can say something kind or something nasty. And of course, always within the limits of my own life experience. But life experience grows and grows and grows, so my knowledge will grow and grow, and my ability to react will change. I will get a much, much bigger range. And of course, the sexual pole transformation plays a role there too, so that one can eventually react over the full spectrum of masculine and feminine reactions. But that's another lecture. So he suggests becoming familiar with the cosmic laws and principles. He says here, such human beings will always believe that it is the others that are the cause of their painful experience, and that they themselves are suffering unjustly and are persecuted or are, in some other way, the victims of the hatred and malice of their surroundings. This attitude breeds bitterness and self-pity and always ends in making its victim a martyr. So martyrdom, the feeling of being a martyr, is a very unfortunate condition. For one thing, it makes you ill. There's a rather funny film about the painter called Dora Carrington, and there's an actor there, and one of the male characters, he's sitting on a rubber ring, and do you know what piles are in Danish? Hemorrhoider. He says, "I'm a martyr to the piles." It's rather fun. I've never forgotten that. It was actually a very funny scene. But I mean, we go around feeling that we're a martyr to the situation. You're a martyr to the bank that's taking too much interest, or you're a martyr to your husband who's left you, or you're a martyr to the employer who fired you, and so on. But this idea of being a victim or a martyr will make you very ill. So it's very important to get rid of that. And it's not in harmony with the truth. We are not martyrs. So in this journey through all these variations on the theme of unpleasant fate, we need some support. And we can get a lot of support from the cosmic analysis, and that's Martinus' task, to give us a theoretical basis for loving our neighbor. He also talks about the support we can get from prayer. Here we see Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's preparing for his crucifixion, and he knows it's going to hurt. And he asks in a moment, if it's possible, let this cup pass me by, or something like that. And then he says, "But Father, thy will, not mine be done." And I think it's a very, very important prayer, and very, very helpful, because you can have all sorts of wishes and plans, and you can have your own will, and it's good to have your own will. But if you add "not thy will, not mine be done," it makes you flexible. It makes you open to what life is telling you. And of course, life is speaking to us through all these living beings. Martinus talks about life's direct speech, the direct speech of life. God is speaking to us through every other person we meet, through every animal, through every blade of grass, through the ocean, through the wind, every situation in life, through war and peace, through good food and bad, and so on. God is speaking to us. So, we, through practicing this attitude of thy will be done, we can open our ears and eyes to God's will and realize that life is one conversation with God himself. And the last section in Livets Bog is a bit longer than this, but he says here, the afterword of Livets Bog is a series of sort of prayers. It was actually the first thing Martinus wrote. And he says, "Thank you for allowing me to wake up to an eternal, glorified existence, and for letting me see and recognize the fire or rays of your sparkling countenance in every living being." Countenance, that's the same as face, ansikt. So here Martinus is saying that he realizes that his experience of life, everyone's experience of life, is a meeting of these rays from God himself. He talks about in Livets Bog that what we experience is individually customed or individually adapted to suit us perfectly. I think I wrote something about it. No. He talks about our fate being the way God manifests love. He teaches us, he brings us up like you bring up children. He entertains us in a way that's individually suited to every single one of us. So God speaks to us in every situation in the language that is most appropriate for every single one of us. So it's this direct, daily interaction with God that we are experiencing. Nothing more, nothing less. So, we are part of the conversation. It's a two-way correspondence. God is speaking to us. We are speaking to nothing other than God. So we are responsible for what we send out. So I hope we can all find some inspiration in the cosmic analysis to work on improving the way we react with our surroundings so that it becomes more loving, more tolerant, more understanding, and more peaceful. Thank you.